And we are recording on Monday, August 25th, 2025 at 11:07 a.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Matt Air. Guys, please go to the QR code on the screen. Please go get the energy drink that sponsors my company. It's caffeine, and I've said this before. It's the most honest thing I can pitch. I'm not saying use this supplement and you'll get abs. It's caffeine. All right. You were gonna buy caffeine anyway, and you were gonna listen to my show for free anyway. Buy the caffeine and I get like 100th of a shekel or something. So please do that. Link in the description. But yeah, it's been a while since you and I have connected. You've been on the show multiple times before, and the link to all your stuff will be in the description. But as I was just telling you, last week I was playing the video game Ground Branch, and I was just me being an OCD person. I love choosing one map and then using every gun on that map and seeing how they compare. And the pistols obviously suck, and then like the machine guns are obviously the best. It's never a surprise. But it was an indoor map and I ran the shotgun, and I fucking hate the shotguns in video games. I always think they suck. And I ran the shotgun, and I not only did I get the most kills I've ever had, I swept the entire map. I also did it in about 20% of the time I normally do it. And it was just because it was indoor CQB, close quarters combat. And I was playing it, and I went like, that was so easy. I just went. I was like, all right, Palmetto State Armory, shotguns, and there was a shotgun that was 1,000 or 500. I think it was 1,000, and I was on clearance for 99 or $90 because the boxes were damaged, and I was like, it was like the most American thing I had ever done. And as I was just telling you that story, you go, so there is a link between the video games and the violence, and you know what, man? Like, hey, no argument here. I've played a video game
Oh,
and I bought
I
a
didn't even.
gun.
Just to be just for disclosure, I didn't say links between video games and violence,
Oh,
but video games
video games
and
and
buying
guns.
guns.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure. But still, nonetheless, I was like,
yeah.
no, that is it's absolutely
If,
true.
and then you were saying like, if only your parents from 20 years ago could see
Oh
you
yeah,
making this
no,
decision, how they'd give you such a hard time.
well, yeah, 'cause it
That
always
was
be like,
right. It's
yeah,
making you buy guns.
but it really was right because they were always like the video games make you violent, and it was always like one, no, they don't, because I'm aware it's a video game. I'm not a dog. I'm aware what's real and what's not. And the other thing is like, and then this is a much worse argument, but you could still make it. Well, let's say you did want to do that, you get it out of your system on a video game. I think that's probably not a good excuse. I tend to look at it as like, yeah, I don't have a 40 IQ. I know that it's on a screen and it's not real. And I also know that, I'm running around sprinting. I know I can't sprint that far. Like to me, it's a game. But it is, video games have bled into my life in two places. Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas, Vice City, Liberty City, Grand Theft Auto 5, in that I will never own a motorcycle. Because if you drive around full speed in Grand Theft Auto 5, you can get into some pretty gnarly crashes. 9 out of 10 times in a car, you'll walk away.
Mhm.
9 out of 10 times in a bike, you will be instantly killed. And to me, I will never own a bike because of that. You instant killed because you fly over the handlebars and you hit something. The second is last week I bought a shotgun. So does it cancel itself out? Safety, don't own a motorcycle and then buy a shotgun. Does it cancel? Is it voided out? Are you my therapist?
No, I'm speaking to you kind of from a distance in Canada, right? Where I only can. I'm a little bit in awe that you could still buy guns. We've been systematically disarmed here. So for me,
Oh yeah, well
uh,
yeah, that just doesn't.
shotguns,
Yeah.
handguns. I think you can get a hunting rifle still, but even that is on its way out. Frankly, it's kind of a. So I look longingly across the border at your ability to just go online and buy a
Buy a
gun.
fucking gun. I love
I'm in awe.
I love this country. And the funny thing is I texted it because it was on sale. I immediately texted it to like several friends. They all bought one. One of my friends goes, "I just bought 10." And I was just like, I was like,
Well,
oh
again, for $90 for a functional shotgun blows my
yeah.
mind. Right?
But straight up $90 for a functional shotgun, let alone the fact that it's a normally much more expensive shotgun. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I?
I'm in awe, dude. I'm completely in awe. As far as like the whole video game thing is concerned, man, I've struggled with that for a while because you know me, I do a lot of like deep dives into like the origins of a lot of the systems that we live in,
Uh,
and you've probably looked at this too. It's not a secret, but you know the origins when you start going at the roots of like where this stuff comes from, you always tend to like walk into some point the military industrial complex and EAS, you know the INSNA that's like running operations to try to like help help desensitize their soldiers in training to increase their kill count, so they don't flinch when they see a grouping of like
Yeah.
Afghan or Middle Eastern brown people or something, and they don't like the fact that people don't actually always pull the trigger because they think human to human action. But then they found that by training in the 70s, their
Yeah, I was gonna
soldiers
say it was
on
in Vietnam. They saw there's sorry to interrupt. They saw there like it wasn't like World War II where it was just open fire. In Vietnam, it was I think the exact wording. It's kind of funny. He goes, people had a hard time shooting people who weren't actively trying to kill them, and they said it like it's
yeah.
a problem.
Well, yeah, then that was like behind the whole Operation Phoenix. Have you looked into
Uh-huh.
Operation?
Yeah.
Yeah, like mass this complete
Had on
special
that author,
forces.
Douglas Valentine, Phoenix. Yeah, pretty
Douglas
good.
Valentine, you spoken
Yeah.
to him?
Oh yeah, I haven't had him on in a couple of years. I don't even know if he's still alive, but I've had him
I
on
don't
for
know
several
if he's alive
books.
either, but his work is
Operation
impeccable.
Phoenix, CIA's organized crime. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible stuff, gut wrenching stuff. I mean, the descriptions that he goes through in terms of what this was. 40,000 non-combatants were like murdered. It was just like, and it wasn't just like murdered. It was torture, psychological warfare operations. Then you start looking at who was behind Operation Phoenix running this stuff, destroying whole villages, still like taking the war to the families of the resistance fighters, like wiping out all of their kids and women in the My Lai, like the My Lai massacre. And then you start looking at who was behind that. And as he goes through, you have people like Edward Lansdale, the guy who like reorganized the entire Green Beret apparatus in the early 60s and participates in the murder of JFK. You got Michael Aquino, the
The
Satanist working with
satanic.
fucking
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like that guy is like doing the Marlon Brando thing in Apocalypse Now. Like that's what they're actually doing as initiatory rites to create these super soldiers that are able to like see virtue in murder. And people like Colonel Alexander, John Alexander, who currently is pretty active with Hal Puthoff and Jacques
Uh,
Vallée and the entire
the UFO guys.
the UFO. I think he's still alive. These guys are like overseeing this thing, and then they come out of that phoenixing with this logic that, well, we had to destroy the village to save the village. And you're like, what kind of logic is that? You had to kill everybody to save everybody? That makes
Yeah,
what?
it wasn't just killing. The vampire shit they would do. There's a
Mm,
lot of rumor. There's a lot urban, it's not urban. It's I guess jungle legend. Because like he's thinking the culture was like beware the vampires, and so what they do is they'd snag a Viet Cong or anyone who was Vietnamese, and they'd puncture
anyone?
two holes in their neck. They would drain their blood from like their carotid or femoral artery because it was easier to do it, but they would make it look like a vampire bit them, and then they would hang him upside down, empty of blood.
Yeah, the Aswang vampires.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
what it was? All right, yeah.
that's what they're called in the Philippines. Yeah, that's what Lansdale was doing. And I think in my because as you know, I've been doing this series of videos on the hidden hand behind UFOs, going through the psyop behind the UFO mythology, which I think is a big part of the big initiation ritual for humanity. Personally, that's where my mind is like now seeing this whole thing as a giant cultural reset to create a new set of religious institutions controlled by a new priesthood around the idea of alien gods that have been interfacing with elites. So I think that they've been gaming this for a while. But
Uh,
but Lansdale, when he came back to the United States, I think that this is behind the cattle mutilation operation that really only began in 1974. As soon as the War was over, that's all of a sudden where they start finding all of these like mutilated cattle bodies that are associated then with some weird sociopathic aliens. Um, and Lansdale is also the guy while he was doing that thing with the Aswan vampires to psychologically like break the guerrilla fighters in Philippines and then in Vietnam. He innovated this idea of elimination by illumination. Heard about that one?
no.
That was part of his program to overthrow Castro.
Eliminate and bite. What's say it again?
Yeah, the idea was to send high density, not high density, but high powered lights into the skies at night above Cuba in order to project an image of the Messiah while dispensing somehow pamphlets or some messaging to the population, thinking that this is now the end times, the Messiah is coming back, and that Fidel Castro is the Antichrist that must be overthrown by the people in order to make Jesus happy. And his
Okay, yeah.
idea was to use high-powered lights that
Okay, no,
would
I
that
do know.
then
I know through Bluebeam, but I know in general there's an idea on
well,
smaller levels to do it in countries.
that's I think the origins of the Blue Beam operation in the 90s that
Uh,
emerged in the 90s.
a
I
global
think it
version
was
of that.
a global version of that. Yeah. And they've already got like you could already see in the last few years YouTube videos in like Brazil where there's like a lot of Catholic, it's a big Catholic population, holograms of Jesus floating in the sky on a cross, and just watching the locals freak out. And I think these are all sort of like psychological
Uh,
test kits of Lansdale's idea from 50 years ago, but that could easily be modified to include also aliens of some sort as well, you know?
and you could really tie that in to, for like an atheist population, or when, we look at it, like there's always the meme of like, what if you took all these drones, like China does them, they make a dragon, they go, imagine putting that over like an uncontacted tribe. But when people say that, it is funny, but when people say that, there's this air of like, but it couldn't happen to us because we're first world, we understand it. So what would you do to a first world country where I would imagine atheism is probably more uh, dominant now or present than it has been, I think, just historically? How would you get them, the ones who aren't the stupid third world? You would do an alien thing, which goes right into the whole like, well, this isn't secular, this is Carl Sagan-esque. That's how you would
Right.
get them. It's the same shit. It would
The
just
same
be,
shit.
yeah. Whoa.
Right. Funny, like how would you get a self-identified intelligent secular atheist population to believe in something like that? Well, obviously aliens. And it's like
You,
we come
yes,
to the
yeah.
place where where aliens has become like the normal mainstream thing. And I was working in a cubicle a few years back in an office job. I only did this for a little while before it broke me and I had to leave. But it was like an eco-fascist university and it was terrible. But everybody, all of the other employees were speaking so openly about their belief in aliens and alien contacts and how many like it became mainstream open conversation amongst normies now that you can do that. Whereas when I was trying to like have a political conversation with some of the students walking through the office about, let's say, why Vladimir Putin may not be the devil and, talking about the New World Order, I would get reprimanded left and right by disciplinary bodies because you're not supposed to talk about, conspiracies
I mean, yeah.
unless the conspiracies are about UFO government collusion for the past 7 years. That's okay. That's all of a sudden all right.
So there's kind of an interesting thread in there, and I hadn't thought about it until you and I started talking. I'd always been aware of Bluebeam, but like, yeah, how would you do that to a, for lack of a better, and I would say this ironic because I have a biology degree, but I do hate the whole, I fucking love science. It's all reductionist materialist. It's like saying, for a fact there is no God is as bad as saying, for a fact that yours is. But it is interesting. Yeah, how would you get that into like kind of a science centric country is, the whole any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But it's also interesting. So Doug Valentine in the Phoenix program, he talks about, how to use terrorism, and then you have these kind of like nodes in the major population centers where you would then have, they're like intelligence nodes, and they're called fusion centers. And then how when some of the guys who set that up, who I guess still had a shred of conscious, when they came back post 9/11 and started seeing that, and they're literally called DHS fusion centers, Department of Homeland Security fusion centers, and they're all the huge cities in the U.S. Apparently, this guy broke down. He was like, "It's the Phoenix program. It's the terrorist Phoenix program we did in Vietnam, but now it's here, and it's not instead of 1968 Da Nang. Now it's in 2003 Brooklyn." And that was kind of where the book ends. And ostensibly, it's because it's all fucking classified. So let's just take that an example. Thing we did abroad, realized to a degree it worked, and then brought it back home. To me, that would be Bluebeam. Again, it
Yeah.
just
That,
worked on the stupid third worlders. How do you then extrapolate that and bring it back domestically? And then, like any good franchise, then how do we bring it international? And it would be,
yeah.
and you're right. How would you do the UFO thing? You would do it very slowly and just start, probably starts with like Fravor and the Tic Tac in like 2014. And it's like every other year, we just get a little more podcast guests, a little more guys talking about things that should be so classified that they and their families will get killed, but they're out there now. And they got the green light. And I'm not saying these pilots are in on it. These are probably dudes just like you and I,
Yeah.
but you see it trickling out, and it's, yeah, it would be beyond presidential. So the first one happens in Obama, and then keep going under Trump and Biden, and it seems like it's still happening. So it would be, which would go right along with, well, it's from a power structure that is beyond the presidency, and you're slowly trickling it out, and they let it kind of hit it close to a fever pitch, and then they reel it back down, and they
Yeah.
bring it up again a couple months later. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has something to do, and I mean all of these like village pacification techniques, population centric warfare that like was dealing with like finding different ways psychologically, culturally, as well as physically to break an entire target population. We we saw a lot of this applied in so many different ways. As you pointed out, the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, the implication of a lot of these helicopters that were innovated in like these super silent stealth helicopters
Yeah.
that they then started bringing into American inner cities as well, right? As just preparation work for the possibility of a breakdown of the social fabric of society, which I think when you look at what are the enemies of America and what have they been like gaming as far as an ambition to try to like undo the American Revolution, which I believe has been an consistent ambition for the past 250 years. I think the undoing of the example of 1776 has been an unbroken intention,
Absolutely.
animating the yeah. And I think that part of what they've been trying to do is to, if they tried to break the US from the outside a few times over through waves of external wars, the War of 1812. But
Civil.
yeah, the Civil War became more of a focus on trying to like work the fissures of weaknesses from within the US. There are certain internal contradictions baked into having slaves while at the same time upholding the idea that all men are created equal. So you could work those contradictions and like keep hitting the weak, kinks of the US sort of psyche by encouraging secession, encouraging, slave versus anti-slave states to pick up arms against each other, which was pretty successful. Although luckily you had certain people emerge that didn't fall for the trap of dissolving the union, though it came pretty close. But I think that they're gaming for it a second time over now, and it took them quite some time to send their tech like stick their tentacles deeper into the American cultural like psyche during the Cold War, especially to the point that people have forgotten what by design what like productive thinking is. What is a productive economy? What's the difference between a financialized economy versus a real economy, bubble versus real investment? Like people have become so distorted in this consumer society cult that we've been like brought to live under the past, what, 50 plus years that you and I were born into this fucked up thing, that all of a sudden our ability to discern what do we do when that shit blows up lawfully into our faces, a healthy society would be like, okay, let's protect the people, let's protect the real economy, the food production, the real jobs, and let's like let the speculative unpayable debts associated with Wall Street shenanigans, let that blow up in the face of these billionaire speculators who never did anything productive with their life in a healthy world. We don't seem to have a lot of that right now. And I think a lot of this was like I think the idea is to get another civil war in the United States by accelerating this breakdown of the system, creating a new phoenixing type of fire across America, maybe a little bit beyond that, for a period of like, pain. And then when people are more mushened up, softened up, they're more susceptible to accept the unacceptable or think the unthinkable as far as now adopting a form of
Order.
new order that would help them feed their families for a little bit, or at least, have a semblance of security. But that pain, that shock therapy that John Perkins outlined as part of like the MO for third world countries of the 60s and 70s when he was working with the World Bank and the IMF, that's the sort of thing that came out of MK Ultra, came out of like seeing how do you break down a person by just destroying their psyche, giving them all sorts of techniques of obviously drugs helps. That's where a lot of the drug culture came out of the MK Ultra experiments on disassembling people's minds to reconstruct them. And then they immediately applied that to like Brazil, to Argentina, to whole nations in the 70s. And I think that they're just using these things as like laboratories to see how much we can expand the so-called principle of phoenixing, of just disassembling out of fire and then recreating out of the ashes something anew that's maybe fucked up and too super unnatural. But
Well,
what,
yeah.
Yeah, but they're really really going for it, and it's very disturbing.
Yeah, well, I think it goes without saying that it's fucked up unnatural because it's like if it wasn't fucked up and natural, you wouldn't have to do it in such secrecy over such a long
Right.
amount of time. You know, it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
if McDonald's wasn't good, we wouldn't have an issue with it. But the thing is
Mhm.
you don't. I could never see McDonald's ads again. I'm still gonna fucking think about a Big Mac. I'm still gonna, versus things that are fucked up and don't taste good, like broccoli. Yeah, you kind of have to have like a come to Jesus. Somebody in your family dies, or you're like, maybe, I'm getting older. Maybe I should take care of my heart. Like, it requires some effort because it's not readily acceptable in the same way of like, well, how would it's working backwards, and you have to. I mean, you have to. They're psychopaths and demons from hell, but you do have to admire their the complexity of their plans, and that, well, how you start with the end goal. How do we get them here? And then how do we walk backwards from? So if your end goal is like, how do we get them all, you know, not even, it's not that we're just censoring them so they can talk, but it's like, how do we get them from literally not even having the capacity for critical thinking? How do we get them to not even know what domestic food production is? And you go, well, that's kind of antithetical. Like, all right, well, let's walk backwards. And maybe it takes 50 years, 80 years. You'd go backwards, and yeah, you'd get rid of why is America so strong? Well, you have the geographical, the oceans and all that. Okay, you got some good, you got a good constitution, but it's like domestic production. It's what won World War II. The Russians, lost 27 million. We lost 400,000. We had the ability to just create tanks and shit like it. All right, well, how would you hollow that out? And it's okay. And how would you make it? Well, the GDP is okay. Yeah, that's all numbers, though. It's like at the podcast, I used to be so obsessed with numbers, subscribers, and views. And it finally dawned on me after several years. I was like, the only thing that matters is revenue. That's the only thing, because that's what pays my bills. I
Mhm.
don't give a fuck how many views I get on an episode. If I have like sponsors on that, or I have like, lucrative ad reads, that's the thing that puts money in my pocket. Okay. So how would you hollow this thing out? All right. And then it's the age-old idea of like, well, how do you bring in the boot? Well, if you're so overpowered, maybe in Canada or something, you could just bring in the boot. You could probably do that in Britain, Soviet Union. But if you have this pesky issue of this armed populace or whatever, you'd have to make them want the boot. All right. Well, how do you make them want the boot? Make the boot uh an antidote to something far worse than the boot. Chaos, anarchy, Mad Max.
Easy.
How do we start chaos, anarchy, Mad Max? Oh, you just see like a bunch of guys and see like, oh, we can do that. We can
Yeah.
do that. We war game this in Vietnam.
Right.
Oh, okay. So then all of a sudden you have this like it's like a pep talk in a locker room. Like, we can do this. We can set up like a global dictatorship. And they're all like, yeah. And like that's how you would do it, is very slowly.
Yeah. And I would imagine that it's I don't know exactly how you would recruit new managers to game this out because this thing is transgenerational. So
Well,
it's
And,
always a
and
challenge to get my mind into like
I
how
always
do you
hiccup on
like
that. I always hiccup on
yeah,
that exact
me too.
thing.
I know it happens, but at the same time, it's like what do you have to like
You'd
press
have
the
to be a
button?
true believer. It's the
I
only
feel
way.
like yeah, it helps. Have you listened to the that creepy speech by Aldous Huxley at Stanford or is it Berkeley? I think it's Berkeley in 1961. I think you're probably going up to get it right now, I'd imagine.
No. I was turning off the air
Oh,
conditioner.
okay. Uh,
Go get my script of it. No.
was I- um, yeah, it's an interesting speech, and you can listen to it on YouTube. Somebody recorded it and uploaded it, and he's speaking to these wannabe social engineers who have clearly like they just want to be alphas in their Brave New World so badly, and their god hero is has come to speak to them right before he dies. This is like a year before Aldous Huxley is dead. But his manual for Brave New World really is a manual. It's not a warning as people think. It's not a warning. And he says so in the Brave New World Revisited 10 years later, when now LSD has been developed, or no, this is maybe even 20 years later. And he writes this addendum where he says, "Oh, Soma,
Uh,
I thought that this was like generations, in the future that we would have to like wait for this to come to us. And here we are. LSD is everywhere, and what a pleasure it is to see how it's manifesting my dream of the Brave New World architecture. And he's like going through exactly what they're doing with his brother, Julian, right? The guy who he's collaborating with his brother, the president of the Eugenics Society. Aldous is himself writing essays in defense of eugenics the same year that he's publishing Brave New World
I
in
didn't know that.
1933. Yeah.
Holy
So
shit.
he's defending eugenics. He's working with his brother from
Sorry,
19.
have you ever talked to Will Ramsey? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, he's a buddy of mine. Yeah, he's
Okay,
cool.
I was about to say I'm gonna make a note. I was like, you need to go on his podcast. Okay, you know him. Never mind. All right, keep going.
Yeah, no, no, like a track's like, yeah, no. William's mind is
He's
on fire.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, all
Eugenics
that to say,
1938, brother. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, I got Brave New World in school, and I think a lot of people I've noticed have had to read that in high school before their critical thinking faculties were intact. And you're like, why would all of these young people all have to have this as part of their curriculum before their critical thinking faculties are intact? Or like nihilistic books like Catcher in the Rye, garbage. Or like was it was the one with the kids on the island who killed Piggy
Oh, yeah, Piggy,
or the
Piggy,
flies?
Orgy, Porgy, yeah, yeah, Lord, yeah,
Yeah, Piggy.
yeah.
This is like being fed this nihilistic crap, which has very insidious Trojan horse ideas about human nature as basically vile, that could only be sort of managed if you have a master class of alpha plus pluses. So that was put there because Julian Huxley ran UNESCO. He founded and then ran the United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization that he set up in 1946. And he did that with that institution. He then had the influence over curricula all over the United States, all over Canada, Europe especially, to then infuse his brother's writing and other garbage authors that were then like propped up to be geniuses and shape the psyches of young people who would then kind of have, whether you like it or not, a misanthropic view of what human nature is, what we are, so that by the time they got into university, you had a choice. You could be a John Savage and reject the Brave New World. You know, that you could read your Shakespeare, read your Bible, read your classics as John Savage did, because he grew up outside of the controlled matrix of the test tube babies, right? He in the savage land, hence his name, and ultimately drive yourself crazy with the futility of thinking that morality has any role to play functionally within society, and ultimately kill yourself, which he does in the book. Okay. Or you could be a Mustafa Mond, the great architect, one of the 12 engineers of that Brave New World Society that confronts in this messed up dialectic with John Savage at the end of that Brave New World book, when Mustafa Mode, who's an alpha plus plus, he's bred to be an upper level manager, rationalizes with John Savage why creative thinking should not be permitted in any type of stable system, because new discoveries introduce creative not sorry it introduces disequilibrium,
Hmm.
which is the ultimate evil as he rationalizes it, and stasis, non-change, is the ultimate good. And so we have to stifle or destroy any type of creative, innovative thought or any type of book that might inspire that, like the poetry of Percy Bysshe Shelley or Shakespeare has to be banned because it might awaken nonlinear transcendental thoughts in people who otherwise need to be well-behaved little automatons in a caste system. So I could see the students at Berkeley listening to their guru give them the insights about, like, well, how are we going to manage this brave new world and make people love their shackles, make people want to fight and die to defend the concentration camp of the mind that we have to infuse into them, you know? But again,
No, no, no.
it's all
It's
there.
no, no. It's yeah. That's such an interesting way to look at. I mean, in many cases, there is like legitimate demon, or whether or not demons are real, I don't know. But I mean, there is a lot of the occult shit. Like it's not for show; they believe it. That's not the point of making though. It's like that's kind of like your traditional angels and demons, right? You got like the people that are the Pizzagate, they're eating babies, and then the good guys like the farmer dad or whatever. And that is good and bad. I'm not mocking that. But this is more of like an abstract but even purer form of good versus evil. It's without all the accoutrements of like, it's a demon, but rather it's like, well, what's just the two quotes from, I guess, the Bible, go forth and multiply, right?
Mhm.
And that implies synergistic change, things as, Howard Bloom says. He's like, you take a proton, electron, and a neutron, all of a sudden you have things that have like different melting points. He's like, where the fuck does that come from? But it comes from the three
Right.
things put together, right? You got all these different
Right.
elements. It's all protons, neutrons, and electrons, but you can get shit from uranium to mercury to silicon to so go forth and multiply. Okay, you're making this exponential increased number of self-aware, I guess, sufficient nodes, which would bring about this equilibrium. And then what's the other? I should know, but it's like a parable. It's like eyes have not seen and ears have not heard, like the gifts that essentially like, God will bring about for his children, which says there are unknown unknowns, but these
Mm.
are, but basically like the Lord will bless you in ways you didn't know. I think I saw a picture trying to explain that parable once, and I liked it. And it was like your life plans, wishes, and dreams, and it's like a rose, and it's like and what God actually has in store for you, and it's a whole field of roses, and it's so that's the unknown unknown, which we go, you know, anxiety says you don't know what problems are around the corner. You could say faith or, doing the right thing could say blessings are going to come to you in ways you don't understand. But regardless, both of those are looking at the unknown as almost like it's okay. It's
Mm.
God doesn't, God only forbids one thing. God truly forbids one thing. And it's like, don't be anxious. Doesn't say it's not going to be hard. Doesn't say it's not going to be scary, but don't be anxious. Fear not.
Yeah.
Versus equilibrium's the ultimate religion. Stasis is good. Nothing new. It's like a much more abstract version of good and evil instead of, demons and angels, but rather,
Right.
and I'm just thinking of this now. This isn't something I've like war gamed out. It could probably has a zillion plot holes, but that's kind of a more interest. I'll put it this way. I'm thinking in high school we had to watch that like whatever the Caprio reproduction of Shakespeare. It's like they all have guns and stuff. What do you remember that one?
Yeah, yeah. Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I just remember thinking it was such a dog shit. But in hindsight, I look at it, I go, oh, it's an interesting take on an old story in modern times. This would kind of
Yeah,
be that. It's like, no, it's not, cloven hoof demons coming out of hell. It's one says go forth and grow, the other
Mhm.
says reduce your carbon emission.
Right. I
It's
love
an
the
it's
fact
an
that
odder look at that.
yeah, it is. And I love the fact that you weave that together with Romeo and Juliet and Shakespeare because as well, like I remember we did read some Shakespeare as along to balance out our Aldous Huxley and nihilist stuff in high school. Like we read Romeo and Juliet and we read Hamlet. But part of it was a bit deceitful because part of the motivation for the students was if you finish reading this book as a group, usually, or some solo reading time, which nobody understood. Like we didn't have the intellectual sort of infrastructure to understand most of what Shakespeare was saying, because Shakespeare's a complicated writer, like it's all metaphorical language. You have to be very an active reader, not a passive reader. And that's very difficult in our modern age to get students to do that. But the idea was we'll be rewarded with a Hollywood reproduction of the thing, which is what everyone was looking forward to. And then that became ultimately both the motive, but then
Dude, that
what
might have
colored
been what
our
it was for us too. I think
because
that's what it was. Miss Carvis's sophomore class in Atlanta, Georgia in 2006. And then
this is
wherever the fuck you went to school.
Montreal, yeah, 1999.
Yeah, what the fuck? I think that's what it was. Is if we finish this, we could watch this on the projector.
That seems to be a standard
What
that
the
they did across
fuck?
the board. Yeah, I know. But but back to the idea of like
Yeah.
what you were saying about be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. Like that idea, because there's two ideas of fearing not, which is the garbage idea that doesn't work, which is I'm not going to leave my room because I'm so afraid of the world around me that I'm just going to stay in bed in my warm comfort blanket. And I won't have fear of the external world of things I don't control. And I'll just be in stasis. And it's like, okay, sure, but that's going to be self-defeating because at some point you're going to have to get outside and you're going to be even more scared because
Because
you
yeah.
weren't preparing yourself for anything versus like go out into the world, lean into the unknowns, have a little bit of like confidence in yourself, fear not. And in the case of like Shakespeare, he's always getting that in his plays. If you look at it the way he intended his plays to be, I think, understood from his own intention, when you look at things like Hamlet, he's exploring and helping you like vicariously live through what a tragic personality does who doesn't make the intellectual breakthrough to fear not and lean into the to not have confidence in in their own higher purpose in life. So you got Hamlet doing his whole like the guy's got tons of potential, a young prince. His father's just been dead or just been killed. probably murdered by his uncle who's married his dad, or sorry, his uncle who's married his mom. That's the woke version. The uncle who's married his dad. But his uncle's probably killed his father, the late king, and he's slowly driving himself nuts. He's got a girl who loves him, Ophelia. She adores him. And again, he's got all of these faculties. Denmark is at war with some neighboring kingdom, and you could see that there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. And it when you really evaluate that play, he had all of the potential to become the type of leader that that society needed to defend themselves from the oncoming enemies. But he doesn't do it. He chooses in that soliloquy when he has a choice to either be and lean into the great unknown, um, or like confront the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and just like really confront it, or not be. He chooses not to be, and instead he like embraces his self-destructive path that he was putting himself on, resulting in ultimately everybody dying, including Ophelia, the girl, the innocent girl that he loved. She dies, everybody dies, he dies, and by the end of the play, what happens, like Shakespeare, this is what's often like left out of the Hollywood renditions of this, including the Hamlet, uh like the Mel Gibson Hamlet from 1992 or 93, which is not a bad performance. But what's left out is this very last scene that I think is the most important scene that Shakespeare put in, which is that Fortinbras, the enemy of Denmark, ends up like walking in to this like scene of death and murder. And it's like, what the hell? I thought I was gonna have to put up a fight. What's wrong with these people?
Oh,
Right? And the kingdom falls to their enemies at the end because nobody
I
actually
thought I was gonna
activated
have
their
to put
higher.
up a fight.
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah. So I think Shakespeare's really intervening on that to get us to think, okay, we all have like a little Hamlet inside of us, and if we give into that desire for whatever ego, the desire for our comfort blanket to not be the better part of ourselves, we will be tragic. And so we don't have to be that tragic part because we could see it on the stage unfold how fucked up that is and how much we don't want that to happen to us. So we would leave that experience hopefully a little bit more self-aware, self-conscious, and more inclined to be stronger men and women who would like go into the world with a bit more confidence.
Yeah, that does seem to be a true like deep down. Like we all want the comfort. You want the comfort of whatever the womb. You don't want to be hurt. I get that. That's a human thing. I understand that. But I mean, even in my short life, I've just always found that like right after, so like I've told you a million times, but like 2014 lost my older brother to suicide, and I just fucking went off the deep end. And like 2 years later, I had this. It was like this room where I just like smoked pot and drank in, and it was like my room, and like I never left, and it was all just like cushions and pillows and video, and it was just like every pleasure I could think of, because I was the most miserable I'd ever been. I just didn't even. I was like maybe if I just and I like blotted out the windows, and it was like dark, and it was just on paper it was like it was the most safe thing ever,
Mm,
and years prior when I was in college and I was to say when I was a pre-med psychopath, I wasn't drinking or smoking, waking up at 5 a.m., cold showers, working out, studying all day. On paper, that looks so much more stressful. But subjectively, I was at peace because I was just out there. I was going for the good fight. I'm going to get into med school and I was conquering all my issues. My GPA is not high enough. All right, well, let's fucking ace this class and bring it up a little bit. And then, okay, so that was like 2016. Ended up moving home with my parents and then started the podcast in 2019 and slowly kind of went back to pre-med time, like stop drinking, stop smoking, regimented, do a show every
mm,
day. Well, how do you do a show? Okay, I don't plan for shows, but I show up ready, meaning I get 8 hours of sleep, I go to the gym and I meditate beforehand. So I make sure that I'm mentally clear, I make sure that I'm not tired and foggy, and I work out because it wakes me up. And that just kind of forced me to do this, and this is, 1,800 episodes in. On paper, the one where I had a waterbed and just took Xanax and smoked pot, you'd be like, oh, that one looks peaceful. That was so subjectively painful because anything that wasn't that was pain. So even something which normally isn't, I don't mean painful like going to the gym is painful. I mean like go get some groceries. That was pain in relation to a waterbed on Xanax versus now I'm sober a year and a half. I exercise every morning. I do the podcast. I read and blah, blah, meditate, go to bed early. You'd be like, that sucks.
Mm.
No, man, I'm at like this is I don't this is an act when I come on here. The fact that you and I come on and like 10 seconds in we're just laughing. I'm telling you about a gun. I like that's all real, and
Yeah.
it's so that you then extrapolate that to where if you look for the boot and if we just bring in a strong man, it'll all be good. That's the waterbed, man. It's
Yeah.
gonna be pain. If you
Yeah.
actually go after like what are some real issues, like, well, maybe it can't be a service economy where, we're paying people for Uber Eats with like NFTs. Like maybe we just have to start like hitting some rivets into a metal board. And that looks painful. I bet if you went back to the 50s and talked to some dude who had a warehouse job, I guarantee you he wasn't full of subjective fear and Facebook like anxiety and on Zolofts. He was probably like, yeah, I work 9 to 5 and I'm not saying it's great. They shoot black people with fire hoses and he probably hit his wife. But you know what? If you were going to live that, you'd be like, oh, I get it now. I get why it's the idyllic 50s. I had money in my pocket, and it's
Yeah.
so I think we can look at things and be like, well, it's going to be hard decoupling from China. Sure. In the same way, it's hard to go to the gym. It's so much harder to be on this back foot, always running from things. Why face a difficult issue on social media when the government can come in and ban it and call it disinformation? I think it's probably better to face an opinion you don't agree with and learn how to grow with that. And so, in general, it does seem like, well, then who's the guy coming in and going, I thought I was going to have to put up a fight? It's China or the China Russia, fucking alliance. I'm not even shitting on Russia in some shitlib way. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, in a power vacuum in a zero sum world, which we're in, you're gonna roll up to America and be like, dude, these pussies are so scared to even hear words they don't like. Words, faggot, retard. I don't mentally challenge people. I have gay friends. I would never say those words in a hurtful way, but they're words. It's 2 syllables. You know what else is 2 syllables? Tommy. They're just noises. And if you can
Yeah.
build a tolerance to those things, you can move through the world without being so fucking scared of everything. You can say, well, I don't want to. I want to stay scared. And we're okay. It's a zero sum world. America's 350 million people. It's less than what? Is it 5% of the world's population? So most of the world is in America. And most of the world doesn't have the luxury to have your biggest battle be he misgendered me. You will eventually face the boot. So it's either do something now or face the boot from another nation, which will, guess what, probably treat us the way we treat third world nations, which is indiscriminate bombing of weddings. So, like, face pain now or face pain a zillion fold later. I don't know where I was going with that, but
No, what I'd say that no, I like this. I like your style, man. I like this because we didn't really plan anything out. It's just like shooting the
never,
shit and sharing
never,
ideas, right? And
never
just seeing
planned.
how an idea will alchemically sort of just transform the course
Let it
of just like
run.
two. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, I would just add um
I'm not married to any of those
I,
ideas. You can shit on all of them. I don't care.
no,
I
no, no,
take no
no.
offense.
I would just like introduce like my thinking about the zero sum game is that I think that we live in a paradigm of zero sum thinking. Like so that I think is definitely the dominant paradigm shaping the life that you and I are living into as far
What
as like
what what do you,
the
what do you mean
core
by that though? Zero sum thinking.
the well that I don't think that the world or the universe is intrinsically zero sum in its essence, but I
Oh,
think
that's the framework.
human
Okay.
yeah, human frameworks, human constructs can be zero sum. And that is like that Hobbesian idea of each against all
All right.
that
All
is
right.
at the root of the order that really emerged over the dead body of JFK and increasingly brought itself into hegemony as the dominant matrix that infused itself into our schools, our textbooks, and other things to get us to, you know.
And you
So
can
I,
see it in the rant I just went on. It's like just because I believe it, that doesn't mean it's objectively true.
but it's subjectively objective, like as it is
Yeah, sure.
a
Okay.
fact that you're right,
Got it.
that it
All right.
is a truthful thing that is activating like that thinking is shaping and causing things in our world, causally, scientifically speaking, is true, but it's not necessarily intrinsically ontologically true. It doesn't hold like, yeah, higher truth.
How do
I
you
don't
get
think.
this stuff to go multi-generational? You have true believers. Whether or not it's real, you have true
Yeah, exactly.
believers. Okay.
Yeah, like how did the rituals of Moloch in the Old Testament, or Baal, how did that shit pass itself down so many generations? You're killing babies. You're
Yeah.
throwing babies into the furnace as your way of worshiping your idea of God. But that didn't just crop up for a decade or two. That was like centuries of worship with the big, for those who are just listening to this, air quotations right now. That was a big thing that the early prophets said, no, we got to stop doing this and declared war against this behavior that was endemic across the ancient matrix, right? The ancient world was baby killing to worship God because the idea was the greater the sacrifice, the greater the bestowment of whatever that the gods will give you as gifts for society. So if you kill your daughter, kill a child, that's a big sacrifice. Then that means bigger payback from the gods. So that's insane. But somehow, there by some logical psycho-spiritual contortions, people got to believing in that. And it was maintained by a priesthood that also had to be groomed into believing that they had to somehow be overseers and protectors of this sacred mythology in order to have certain political effects that they found beneficial to their ability to control a mass system, right? And when you kill children or you tolerate that, you lose some of your humanity. You're not going to have your full faculties, your full creative powers of moral discernment available to you. You just compromise way too much of that, and you will be bestialized. And a beast is much more easy to control than a human that believes that they have dignity and a yearning for freedom that they deserve. So, if you bestialize everybody, and that's where I think a big part of the ancient mystery cults that ran the ancient world's cultural systems really encouraged this idea of Dionysian or Bacchanalian like orgiastic rituals at night, especially on Friday, after your so-called working period was over, where you had to be an Apollonian good slave doing your duty in the daytime, whipping yourself because you really wanted to service your lusts at all times, but you couldn't because you had to do your duty, a la Apollo. But then at night you could like let the beast out, a la Dionysius. And then you could just be who you really were as this, ecstatic, altered state oriented, orgiastic, animal. And by getting people into that modality of flipping from like booty to ultra perverse liberty or libertinism, they would get people so disgusted with themselves culturally that they couldn't understand why an alternative system to the master slave structures was even possible, because animals need zookeepers, right? You need some sort of an overseer to impose order onto your slavish disgustingness at the end of the day. So you lose faith that human beings are actually made in the image of a living, loving, reasonable creator. You have no ability to understand that in a meaningful manner. So people will just be more easily adaptable to the system of some Darwinian construct of like, we'll control the environment, you adapt into it, right? And I see that I think that type of understanding of the mechanisms of cultural control of the ancient world was very much present in the minds of those social engineers who have manufactured. I mean, what I just said, I think a lot of people would recognize in their 9 to 5 cubicle culture where, everybody's living for Friday or Saturday night. That's what the purpose of your life is. I just want to fucking forget this pain of nihilistic, useless jobbery in order to just like let loose in a rave or whatever. And then lick my wounds of shame and guilt for having slept with whatever, and
Yeah.
then just do it all over again cyclically, right?
No,
So
I got pissed real quick. Tell everybody where to
yeah,
find.
do it,
I
man.
always mean to say urinate. My mom watches the shows and she says it's so gross when I say I need to use the restroom. To tell everybody where to find you.
All right. I don't know if this is still being recorded. I guess it is. Okay. He said, tell everybody where to find me. Well, people, I don't know how long Tommy takes to urinate or use the restroom. However, I will speak at a slightly slower gait because I don't, again, he might take him 3, 4 minutes. Some people are fast, some people are slow. No idea how much he drank last night or how much that coffee in a bottle stuff he's been sipping on. So, where people could find me, I would suggest go to my Substack, which is matthewehret.substack.com. And you can get free things as well as paid advantages for people who want to become paid subscribers, which include all of my books, my PDFs, access to events that I host every week, often twice a week. Um, you can go as well to the Canadian Patriot Review. That's something I set up in 2012. And on that website, you will find options to purchase books, many books that I have written that my wife, Cynthia Chung, has also written. These are books that deal with things like Revenge of the Mystery Cults, the ancient mystery cults of latter day times. Latter, I don't know if that's the right use of the word latter day, all the way up until the present configuration of messed up theosophy and other satanic OTO organizations in our present time. And all of that's available on CanadianPatriot.org.
Canadian Patriot.
Hey, Tommy.
I'm back. So
All right.
there's something I thought about,
Mm,
or it made me think about was so it's like now I'm in like the more regimented version of my life, and it's a lot easier than what should have been fun. The fun
mm,
thing was a lot harder pre-med college, but the transition from me going from like my freshman year of college, where I was never really one or the other, just whatever, as a freshman drinking, whatever, being stupid. My sophomore year is when I was like, okay, I probably got to start putting all this together. And I just tried to start like doing things right, getting up early, working out more,
mm.
studying, whatever. One of the things I did was get a job, and I got a job at the bar that my freshman year we'd frequent a lot, flip-flops. And I was just a bouncer there, and you had to be sober. And I was also now just kind of not drinking because I was in study mode and whatever. Being sober there, and then it was like a perfect control group because it wasn't something new. It was a bar I had been to a zillion times with all of my friends, fraternity brothers, who were still there. So
Mm.
I just like stepped out of this, but it's still the same thing. Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, coming and doing the same things. And I remember watching and now I look at it and I go, I don't know how I was surprised, but at the time I was surprised at seeing just how much not fun they were having. Subjectively, I knew it was a blast because I had been at all of those booths. I had drank at all of those bars. But just watching them dead sober, just kind of observing and watching these nights unfold of where they'd be drunk to where they'd be shit faced to where they would just be plastered at the end of the night and people are screaming and singing and dancing and seeing how not real any of it was. That it was all, if you had taken away the alcohol, they weren't doing anything that was like fundamentally fun. It wasn't that they were
Yeah,
out, whatever, at a nice cabin in the mountain, whatever, you see it in a clip or whatever. It was just alcohol, which was like
yeah,
Soma.
yeah,
And seeing that and having always done that and then not doing it was like it was like stepping behind, like stepping off stage and like watching, or it's like had always being in the audience, and then now I was backstage and I was seeing it, like all the backgrounds and the curtains and the actors. I was like, I was seeing behind the curtain, and then I was like, well, what was I doing also now that I wasn't doing? Well, instead of waking up hungover, I was getting up and going to the gym. Okay, what was I doing? I was dealing with things like what? I'm going to bring that GPA up. I'm going to, lose some of that freshman 15 I got. Just not even realizing it, I was also tackling kind of the biggest things. Like, you're not, it's not a lot of money, but when you're 20 to, make $100 as a bouncer at night and you're like, okay, so now the money issues, I'm realizing, I'm not having that weird, convo with mom and dad. Can you give me some money? I'm not, looking in the mirror like, oh shit, I'm adding some weight. I'm dieting. And then I'm also not, man, fuck this week, fuck those classes. Let's just go out and get hammered. So not only was I not doing it, I was actually unintentionally working the problems of what was
yeah,
causing. It's one thing to go out because, hey, it's fun. It's another thing when you need it. You're like, dude, fuck this week. I just need to go get drunk. And
yeah,
without even realizing, I was like, I'm no longer doing the thing that I'm actually dealing with the issues that demanded me, the bad thoughts of those would demand me to go out and get drunk and forget it.
yeah, yeah,
And it started to work and it was the weirdest, like, holy shit. So as you're saying, the work the whole week, flog yourself and do the things and then go out and let loose and let it all out. And then again, Sunday, you're like, man, that was bad. I shouldn't have done that. It was, it was like stepping outside of it and
yeah,
watching it. And that's kind of how where I am now. So like now that I don't get like shit faced on Fridays and play video games, like what do? I get up early and I'm like, I've lost like 30 pounds in the last year. I'm like, oh, I'm saving more. I'm adding that a lot, but I'm adding to the savings, which make me freak out about the podcast less, or I'm not like, where's next month's rent coming from? I'm like, okay, I've got a couple months. Okay, we have time to war game. And that makes me a better host. I'm not like doing the show and at the same time I'm like, fuck, I gotta pay that bill. I'm a little more relaxed. I can like be here entirely with you.
Right.
And it was just to, I don't know, not use the Soma, to not go,
Yeah.
it's all so bad. It's like the reason it's bad is because you're not addressing the things that are making it bad. And it's getting
Yeah.
bad
Right.
because you're using the Soma, which you use to escape the thoughts about the
It's a self-fulfilling. Yeah. Well, I have a similar, so I have a similar but different experience, but for me, like, so your trauma ar- was instigated by your brother's suicide, you're saying, right? Like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. For me, like, it wasn't a suicide so much, but I felt like it was a bit of the death of the soul when in 2004, for me, it was just like it was my just the way I reacted to my discoveries that 9/11 was done as, a ritual
Inside
murder.
job. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't look away
Saturn
from that. And
alien,
for
yeah.
me, I had other friends I was getting high with. We would share conspiratorial sort of conversation and things that we were observing on BitTorrents when we would download little documentaries and stuff. And so it was but the difference between me and them is like for some reason, I don't know what it was, but it was much more real for me. I was like, if this is true, that means everything is wrong. Like all the social contracts have to be put null and void at this point, and we're living in a society run by something that wants to kill everybody. All that has been shaping my education system, shaping our culture, that's been pushing us into a slaughterhouse, meaning everyone you love and care about has been targeted for murder at the very least. And it's like that was an obsessive thing. I was like, holy shit.
Can't put it
Like,
away.
and I can't put it away. Couldn't put it away. And my friends were able to put it away. I don't know why, but it was like a form of like entertainment for them. They didn't differentiate reality and fiction. For them, it was just like another thing that is interesting, the cult of interesting. And it compelled me to get a little obsessive, maybe a little unhealthily obsessive in my research. I didn't really have a method, though I had some good habits, like trying to read original writings. I somehow had that as an instinct, which was good. I was like, okay, if somebody says Albert Pike was a really bad guy, founded the Scottish Rite, or at least revamped it and set up the KKK, is that true? Did he write anything down? And can I find what he wrote? So I would hunt those things down. I'd do interlibrary where I could, or verify that something was a lie or a fake piece of misinformation on a website. So I had at least a good instinct, but I had no sense of solutions. It all just seemed like more evidence that we're deep, like we're screwed as a society. Um, and so I self-medicated for like 2 years from 2004 to 2006. I was just dealing with that in unhealthy manners. Just doing a lot of drugs, drinking, whatever, just to try to
Sure.
like and I'd have my friends again who I'd like be able to converse with about some of these things. But then at a certain point, I was challenged by this with the LaRouche organization in 2006 in the summertime. I was on like a smoke break from work, and they were, there was a political table giving away literature with some signage saying like "Stop the depopulation agenda." And for me, I was like, I don't really want to talk about that so much, but I've got 15 minutes to spare while I'm smoking, so why not? And then I found myself surprised that there were people who acknowledged a lot of the things I had been obsessing about the New World Order and things, but the difference was they actually had some proactive orientation and a sense of solutions that I had no idea
Had
of,
to
right?
start pushing back.
Yeah, and they started, a few of them left my number, went to a meeting just to see what they're talking about, and they challenged me to go to Washington D.C. with a bunch of them to lobby Congress about restoring Glass-Steagall, like this thing I didn't even hear about or I didn't know about, which was like a law that forced the division of banks or between speculators and clean investment bank or clean commercial banking. Um, and I at first I was like, no fucking way. The US is a police state. I thought, and that was part of my like only looking at the bad side of things. I was like, at the second I go to the US, I'm going to be in like a FEMA camp. Um, So I was a little bit overly paranoid. But I was really challenged by the fact that one of their organizers had a platonic dialogue with me, and because I really felt like hot shit. Like I felt like I knew more than I actually did know. And I knew a lot of facts about secret societies and Illuminati and stuff like that. But at the same measure, I couldn't prove why the oligarchy was wrong. Because I knew that they wanted to depopulate the world to like whatever 500 million or a billion or whatever the carrying capacity was. That was a big governing influence in driving the oligarchy's overarching plans. But when I was asked, like, well, what can you prove why that's not necessary? I couldn't do it. I couldn't actually at that time prove why they were wrong. And the person didn't give me
Uh,
the answer. This organizer said, well, that's why you need to come with us to Washington. I was like, fuck, you got me. And it bugged me for like it was just like a splinter in my head. I was like, do I do it? Do I not? And then I chose, okay, I'll do it. These people seem to actually be more advanced morally, even though I think I'm more intellectually advanced. So I went and did it. And then I felt I discovered that there was a reputation. I would like I I as a Canadian was set up like in a team of three people, three organizers. There was like 100 members who came from like Australia, Europe, all different parts of the US to go to Washington for a week and just like do work. We hosted a conference, or they were hosting a conference, and we all had lists. I had like 20 congressmen and senators that we had to go and give literature and brief them or their staff about the importance of Glass-Steagall and the oncoming economic collapse. This is 2006. They were looking at the subprimes that hadn't blown yet.
okay.
Yeah, so it was a little bit ahead of the curve, but they were looking at the right things. They were looking at the derivatives bubble before a lot of other people were, and they were looking at preventatively doing something about it now that would not involve people like being,
Yeah.
murdered with the blowout. So all of a sudden, I found myself at Ted Kennedy's office before he died. Now, Ted Kennedy's a bit of a shit, but at the same time, he had certain
There are
moral
some virtues, even though they're all demons from hell. You will meet some that are like, oh, okay.
and his like so it's me, an African guy from Nigeria, and an Australian girl, right? Going to Congress telling the Americans what to do, and I'm Canadian. I don't know shit. I'm just trying to like keep my mouth shut and just listen to what these slightly more experienced people are saying. And they're not even all that competent. And like they're young people who don't know that much either, but they're all like telling Ted Kennedy's chief of staff comes out and he's like, hey, you're the LaRouche people. Do you have a new EIR for me? And I'm like, what the fuck? This guy knows who we are? Because that was the name of the magazine, was Executive Intelligence Review, EIR. And I'm like, wait a minute, you know about this thing? I'm just like, again, keep my mouth shut, just listening,
Babe in
watching,
the
trying to learn.
woods. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, there's something real going on here. And these people and a lot of other congressmen had their chiefs of staff come out, talk to us. We receive a briefing. Some got an invitation to come to a conference that weekend. And I came back with like an idea, okay, there's this other spectrum of reality I've been ignoring. And I need to like take myself a lot more seriously because a lot of the things that I became more aware that a lot of the things that I thought were knowledge were actually making me psycho spiritually impotent. I couldn't move because I knew how bad it was, but I knew it was impossible to try to even fight the oligarchy. That's not real knowledge because real knowledge should be a power to change things for the better. Like knowledge is power, not power to do nothing, but
It's
power
black
to,
black pill. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I gave myself into becoming like I said I'm gonna do this full time. If this has even a slight fraction of a chance of being possible, and the
It's
oligarchy's not as
it's
godlike
morally
in
and
their powers
ethically
as I thought,
obligatory. It's obligatory
yeah,
to
then
do
I
it.
said, well, I quit what I was doing in my shit. I was working at a net cafe. They still had internet cafes back in those days. Um, I dropped out of school at that point, got out of university because that was also a self-mutilating fine arts deconstructionist uh, operation of abstract. I just knew I was self-mutilating myself by doing more and more abstract things that were in disharmony with what my soul yearned to do with art. And I just became a full-time volunteer, which involved like being more disciplined, working like 10 days every day, going out, doing street organizing. Like it's a lot of work, like to put out a table, to prepare to have conversations with normies who are living in Shadowland who will see what you're saying and either ignore you or despise you because there's a lot of slander. So we got like spat on a lot of like, and then occasionally you're looking for like where are signs of life? So within the course of a 10-hour day, you speak to five or six people who have a little hunger for thinking outside of the cage, it's good. Like that's a success because you're looking at more the quality over the quantity. And then in the context of that, there was like a curriculum working on original literate, like the original writings of great thinkers who made history move in a better way, who made discoveries of universal principles like Kepler, like Leibniz. How did Leibniz discover the infinitesimal calculus? I was like, well, rather than just memorize the calculus and like use the language of symbols that I've been given, let's actually look at what type of physical experiments on like catenary curved chains, like hanging chains, were being done by people the Bernoulli brothers and Leibniz in the 18th century, who then discovered a language of nonlinear change. But they write down in their writings what experiments students can do to
Good.
reconstruct the eureka in their own mind, which you don't get in our current garbage school system that tells us to memorize the thing but not know what caused the formula to emerge as something usable. We don't get that. Or like, how did Kepler discover his three planetary laws? Well, friggin' like I picked up this book and that's what we read for like 3 years is like Kepler's Harmonies of the World, which is readable. And Kepler's going through all of the mistakes he's making, all of the like experiments he's doing, and his third law of planetary motion is like rooted in shit like that. Like he's actually working through the hard and soft musical scales and the Pythagorean proportions that cause a do and a fa and a re and a mi to be located on a string in certain proportions
Whoa.
that he finds are directly in tune with the positions and speeds of the planets, their minimum and maximum distance from the sun around the in our solar system. And
Whoa.
that's how his third planetary law of motion emerges, which you don't get if we just get subjected to our oligarchical school system that gives us the shell of like whatever the square period of each of the planet has a relationship to the cube of the mean distance of each planet to the sun, and you could just apply it. But it's like,
Not
how did that
intuitive,
emerge?
but it's not
It's not
intuitive.
self-evident.
You don't feel it in your bones.
No, no, not at all. Like you read that, you're like, oh shit, he's a musician. He's got a faith that God created the universe with reason and beauty. Okay, that's how he's doing it, and he's setting you up. He's setting up the experiments, and any student can build. Like we could have, and that's what we did. Like we had a monochord, like Pythagorean real, just simple thing. It's a box with two strings, and then you could just like do the experiments and listen to what's the sound of an octave or a triangle or a square, which basically just divides triangle divides the string three times, a square four times, and you can get proportions like one fourth to three quarters, which becomes a what is it, a fourth on the musical scale. The triangle, which is two-thirds to one-third, so two-thirds string plucked to the whole, becomes the fifth on any type of hard or soft musical scale. You can then like construct the hexagon or the pentagons and get the two-thirds, two-fifths to three-fifths. You can get the four-fifths as well, and discover that that's a what is it? It's a soft hard sixth, and you could then start like playing it up and then adding other octaves to it and figuring out like, well, how many octaves are there in the solar system if we have this many planets? And what about the planets that Kepler didn't know about? Do they conform to harmonies that he discovered with the six knowable planets? And they do. So, and then you discover that, oh shit, that's one of the few things from classical physics that's still applicable and useful in quantum mechanics. It
Uh,
wasn't thrown away like many of the Newtonian formulas were. The Keplerian formulas are actually still very, very useful in the quantum realm. And you're like, oh fuck, okay, there's
I
this
didn't
beautiful
I didn't know
consistency.
that. I was gonna
Yeah,
say part of the issue that always gets me with like quantum mechanics is it doesn't feel like any of it intuitive. There's no like you don't feel it in your bones kind of thing. Like you understand you can under if you understand like cellular biology, it's easier to understand even, sociology. You start looking at things as just, oh, it's masses of quantum mechanics seems like it goes out the window.
yeah. Well, I guess it's like this randomness thing that came in because I know Kepler too. He wrote an essay in 1609 called "On the Six-Sided Snowflake," and it's a cool essay. And I, it seems like that's the origins of modern like real quantum mechanics, not the garbage that we were given from the Copenhagen school that sort of became pervasive after 28. Like the Niels Bohr, school that 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 the Rockefellers were sponsoring to dominate how scientists and students should try to interpret what was going on in that realm imposed. And people like Max Planck and Madame Curie and Einstein, who were people making discoveries, all saw the flaws in that entire paradigm, but they couldn't stop it. There was too much money, too much like enforcement of that Niels Bohr Heisenberg school onto the system. But when you look at Kepler in his six-sided snowflake, he's like asking like what's well, his basic question is why are all snowflakes six sides, right? And he's looking for six folded symmetries in pomegranates or like, you know, uh honeybee cones, which you can cut, but he also then looks at like the fact that these hexagons that we find organically in nature often will occur as a cross section, a two-dimensional cross section of a three-dimensional thing,
Hmm.
oftentimes being a rhombic dodecahedron, like a 30-sided dodecahedron, which is what the shape of like a honeycomb is in its three dimensionality, right? Or anyway, so he's like what he's doing in this very short essay is he's just trying to hypothesize what would be the harmonies of physical space time. He doesn't use the word physical space time, but I think that that's what he's doing. It's like what's the construct of space that causes on the macro and on the micro things to sort of emanate, not with seven or snowflakes to organize themselves, not with seven or five sides, but always with six sides. What would be what does that say about the subatomic realm and the macro realm, which we see like this sort of stuff on the planets? Like that was his planetary geometries that he was working on that he had to work with because you're looking at like the hexagon sound, which organizes portions of planets. Also, we see hexagons too on a visual level, just on like the on Saturn's sort of apex, right? At
Hmm.
the so we see these things in gems and stones and molecules forming slowly. You know, you get this in various like yeah, just different minerals that form in these geometries. You see it all over the place, and so I think that that's what was like abandoned with this Rockefeller funded takeover of the paradigm of quantum mechanics was this idea that was brought in, which is that, well, truth doesn't exist. Like Niels Bohr is very explicit. He's like, we cannot believe in any existence of truth. That behind what appears to be order and symmetry and beauty is actually randomness in its
Just
essence.
magic, yeah.
Yeah, basically it's magic. And then at that point, anything goes. If you deny truth, then whatever you call that science is going to be just open to whatever interpretation you want. And you can start introducing more
Like
dimensions
the fiat
that are,
currency of logic. You just add more.
yeah, yeah, more epicycles, more whatever. Just create like dark matter, create dark energy. If the equation doesn't work and you know the galaxies don't quite fit your Big Bang models, just add a new variable that mathematically you can create, but there's no ability to test it out. And you can say, oh, it's dark matter pressing itself onto galaxies to keep their coherence, because otherwise the formulas predict that they should all fall apart by their own rotational spin. And, there's nothing to hold them together except this invisible shit that we'll never be able to see, but that somehow makes up 99% of the universe, you know?
That's such a convenient load of horse shit.
Yeah.
99% of my model is explained by things that I can't see or measure and that you will never be able to see or measure. It's like that's not
Yeah.
that'd be like if
What?
99% of the podcast revenue came from source X. Be like, Tommy, how do I start a podcast? I'd be, yeah, you get on Relevance, but like, what's source X? We can't tell you. Well, you would naturally start to think that this is horse shit or I'm laundering money or I'm selling coke. Like, at a certain point, like you'd be like, but the whole like feeling it in your bones thing of Kepler, like I get that even just like for me, it's like the podcast to me is no different than getting into medical school. It's regimented work over long periods of time with goals in mind and remembering them and taking off days and but keeping the big goal in mind and knowing that it's a game of inches and added up over thousands of hours of studying it does matter, which to me, getting to med school, I drew upon working out in middle school and high school, which I had done for like 8 years at that point, and I knew there was no shortcut. It was drinking milk, eating just chicken until you feel nauseous and just working it every day. And it's no pain, no gain. If you're not hurting, it's not working, so I could draw in those personal things that weren't taught to me. Nobody taught me to get into lifting weights. I just did. Nobody told me to become pre-med. I just did. No one tells you how to study. You just figure it out. Even with the podcast, it's like there's no guidebook on like you will do this. It's all just make it up as you go, you know? In the
Mm.
same way that I'd show up like you no notes, we just show up and start talking. But there is regimen that it's, you know, I turn the phone off, make sure I'm here. I'm talking to you. I'm not playing around doing all this shit. I'm not tired. I'm not hung. All this stuff is like these are all things I feel in my bones. That even if I can't put it on paper, I'm like I know that abstractly getting the podcast to a point where I can pay for my rent is no different than studying organic chemistry, which is no different than working out biceps. And I know that because I've seen, no one needs to tell it to me because I know it. You don't need to sell gravity to me. I'm aware of it, right? And if you remove that and it starts to turn into this abstraction where because all the way down to, like subatomic chemistry, it's still kind of, I get it. It's building blocks, it's puzzles. But yeah, you get to quantum and all of a sudden it's either you're too stupid to understand it, that's a cop out, and it's if you can't under it's all magic. Things exist and they don't exist at the same time. There's only one, but there's also a trillion of them at the same time. Electron entanglement. So there's nothing faster than light except for this, which is instantaneous. Superposition means it's moving and it's still at the same time. If you don't understand it, you're just a fucking idiot. And you're like, huh? And
Yeah.
it's so if the basis is just quicksand you start looking at the skyscraper that's built on it, you go, okay, if that's there, but that just means that's going to go down too, unless of course the quantum mechanics part isn't real. But if the base is fucked up, which kind of goes back to you and like the depopulation thing, is like for me, like when I started studying and especially when I started working at the bar, I could never go back because I realized that it was just never, it wasn't real. I couldn't, I tried. I would go back to that bar and get fucked up, and I'd be like, I know it's just not real. I know it's just we're just milling around and just bumping into people like pinballs and taking selfies and calling it a
Dude, the
crazy night.
same thing happened too. I
You
would meet up
can't
with
throw it
my
out the
friends.
window. And I tried to
I
go
would,
back to sleep. I was like, I just want to be a drunk frat boy again. And it was like, no, man, this isn't real. And in 3 years, you're out of here and got to go to the real world. So I finally was like, I guess I'll study and go get in a med. And it was better. It was better. You can't unsee it. And it sounds like that's what it was for you. You're like, if this
exactly
is
the same thing.
real and the
Yeah.
imperative is that they're trying to kill everyone on the planet,
Yeah.
it is now unethical for you to go back to sleep. You could say, well, how come I had to wake up? Hey, I don't know. Shit happens, but it landed on your plate. Now you have to go, you have to work. You see the bottom floors of the Titanic flooding. You could be like, oh, I just want to pretend like I didn't see that. But hey, man, you
There's an
now
open
know
bar right here. There's an
it's an
open
open bar
bar.
right now. But you're like, dude, it's starting to rock. The boat, and you're looking around. And you see a bunch of little kids. You're like, God, I don't know why you made me aware of this, but hey man, we probably got to start putting the lifeboats down. I don't want to be a buzzkill, but like it because you look at it and it's so real. You go, no, you cannot ignore this. You can't ignore this. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what it sounds like your experience
It
was.
was it was exactly that too. And I remember I did that for 10 years from 2006 to 2017 and I was doing it full time, living in a group like a group house. You would qualify this as poverty, like we'd have like maybe a $40 a week stipend. That's enough to buy like food at a dollar store to not die. And it's like
Yeah.
that's not good living from our conventional standpoint, but I was very satisfied. And people saw me like doing the grueling work and like not having a lot of the luxury items that a lot of my friends had. But I was satisfied. My conscience was
You
satisfied.
were
My
purifying,
intellectual,
you're pursuing it, and so you
yeah,
make
exactly. I was doing so, and then I would see them, and I would occasionally try to do what I used to do. I'd see them like 4 or 5 years later occasionally, and I'd smoke
try
a
to
spliff
give
with
you
them,
away.
and then they're in a time capsule. They're just not only stagnant, they're kind of getting worse subtly, and they don't even see it.
And deep down
And
you're
I'm just
jealous, and deep down you're jealous of them. Deep down, you wish you could, man, I
There's a
fucking
certain desire. Yeah, that's why that's why when they pass me the spliff, I'd be like, okay. And I'd
put me
try to
back to
like
sleep. Put me back to
recapture that.
sleep.
And I'm like, no, I know too much. I can't unsee it. But then you see, based on what you just said, all of these contradictory, like in string theory and in all of the quantum mechanical assumptions presume that things can be both like must be both here, the electron must be here, as well as, in another dimension, in every dimension, everything that has happened, or can happen, has happened in other dimensions, everything has happened. If everything is true, right? In some other dimension, I could literally turn into a purple hippopotamus with wings and like breeze through my office wall and fly up into the sun. You can't say it's impossible ontologically because whatever, atoms are constantly transmutating and like shifting, and maybe in some other universe that actually did happen. And if I could think it, it did happen. And if everything is possible, if everything is true, then nothing is true, then you're stagnant, right? But then you see how easy people will then accept an Orwellian set of thoughts like good is evil, beauty is ugliness.
Voltaire, those who can convince you of absurdities can make you commit atrocities.
That's very poignant. I never heard that one. That's solid.
I think it's Voltaire.
Yes.
Maybe it's Hitler. I don't know. But regardless, the point it is Voltaire.
It's very yeah. And when you look at the again, why would the Rockefellers put so much money into science? Both they were doing the same thing in medical science, but they were doing it in pure mathematics and quantum mechanics, but they were also doing the arts too. Like the Rockefeller Foundation was funding the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was a CIA front group of the 40s that sponsored Jackson Pollock, all of the modern arts and atonalism of Theodore Adorno. Were getting millions of taxpayer dollars and Rockefeller dollars to sponsor the growth of this new kind of art that had never been seen before around this idea of uh just uh, well, basically it's a cult of ugliness of just like let's
All
just deconstruct
dog shit.
everything. Yeah, exactly. Let's just pop like splatter paint thoughtlessly and then give it some meaning after the fact of
And
what I was trying to emotionally express about this being a reflection or a mirror of the ugliness of the world. And that makes it more authentic because humanity is intrinsically, we act like we're noble and we believe in morality, but we're a nasty, poisonous, toxic species of hypocrisy and all of this shit. So this type of ugly art was justified by being a reflection of the true ugliness that we are as a species. That's how they justified themselves. And if you thought naively that there is
I
order and
thought the
meaning,
Sistine Chapel was beautiful. Shut up. That's not the human spirit.
no, that's pure papist
Comes back to it,
hypocrisy.
which comes back to self-love versus self-hatred for all this shit. Why should we be static? Why should we not expand into the solar system? Because we're evil.
Yeah, why would you want to spread a parasite or a virus into the universe? Didn't we do
Self-hatred.
enough damage to the earth? Why cause that pox to go and spread
Why would
beyond the
you
earth?
and so why would the end goal of all this be self-hatred? Well, I don't know. Who in theory are you made in the image of?
Mm,
Who would hate him the most?
mm.
And I don't even mean it in some I don't even
Interesting deduction there.
yeah, but I don't even mean it in some like, hey, I'm Irish Catholic. Yes, I do believe in God and pray all that. But I'm not even like nailing that down. I think most of it's abstract. I believe in God in the most like pure sense that there is that entity, and how it was taught to me through Irish Catholicism is just how it was taught to me in this iteration in this life. And a zillion years ago on a different planet, it would have been taught to me somewhere else. But I mean, it's like you were made in the image of God, and it's like, well, then if you were made in that image, who would try to make you fucking hate yourself in any way possible? From 1984 and Brave New World to reduce the carbon footprint, eat the bugs, we're not growing. Why? Well, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's like people that really hate their ex-wives and they'll say like it's so fucked up and they're like, but I hate seeing my daughter because she looks exactly like my ex-wife. It's like that's just the root of evil and toxicity. Now multiply that times a trillion, and what would be I don't know, devilish take to fuck an earth growing with sunshine and rainbows, and they want to put that on more planet? Yeah, you make them hate themselves. Sorry, keep going. I interrupted you. I apologize.
Nah, dude. No, that's it's this misanthropic.
We're
Yeah,
back.
I mean, yeah, and then you see like how they do this to students today is and it's so much worse than it was for those students listening to Aldous Huxley, and it's gotten like so much more insipid. like where kids, even, little cousins in my own family, they're really nice kids, but they have a deep unnatural misanthropy that no child, no human should ever have. But they're kids because they were induced to, watch man-made climate change scare snuff films,
Yeah.
in elementary school
You're
in grade two,
evil.
grade
You're the reason
three.
why all the earth is dying.
Yeah, and they're
It's
all like
clearly
being told to
taught because
catharsize with the
kids aren't like that.
eh, like so. Yeah, I mean, at that age, your emotions, your empathy is at its maximum, or it's super super raw and powerful, and so to direct that towards sharing the suffering of the trees getting cut down, it's like you getting your head cut off slowly, and the kids are going to like collective trauma bonding together
And
before
what
they're
kind
like
of
even out of
philosophy would
elementary
do that
school.
to kids? What kind of philosophy would want to do the perversion of innocence?
No, it's exactly that, right? So there is this super hateful principle, and I think that that's in the simplest way, like the oligarchy, and this is where I would also say like at the origin of a lot of the zero sum paradigm, it comes out of this like it's Hobbes, like, and what is Hobbes? So Thomas Hobbes is a whore for the empire. He's he's working with Francis Bacon. They're probably having some weird sexual relationship, it seems. He's his assistant to Francis Bacon when he's a young guy getting stupped. And like Hobbes is devoted to what Bacon is devoted to, which is a global system of a high priesthood controlling the world under control mechanism, which has certain beliefs that has to be infused, which is the presumption that all human beings are beasts to men, like that everybody wants to destroy their neighbor and steal their stuff, and that all we can do is try to impose our will to power to protect our tribe, destroy our enemy before they or our neighbor before our neighbor will destroy us because that's their impulse. And then you apply it both from the community to the collective to humanity as a whole. And then you get everybody to start like hurting each other preventatively before they're hurt because you assume that humans are naturally bad in their natural self because
And
it's just a fight for diminishing returns
and
in a closed
I don't
system.
hate you. I'm a
Yeah,
realist, and I just know if I don't take it, you're gonna take it.
exactly. Exactly.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You can see it
But that
bleed
was a big
over
assumption.
into,
Whereas
yeah, my whole thing earlier where I was like, it's a zero sum world. I had never once, truly have never once questioned whether or not I just take that as fact. Like why are we zero sum?
but
Nature
you
seems
don't
to
live
be
like
not
that, right?
zero, nature seems to not be zero sum. Pollination,
Yeah.
seeds, it seems to be, I don't know, extraordinary excess, enough for everybody.
Super abundance creating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that like trees in Canada bleed sugar, like like
Yeah,
how can you
wait.
believe God is like evil and irrational and like
Canada.
when we've evolved trees that bleed tasty sugar, like
Well, and
uh,
that's no, and it's you pointing that out earlier to me is like, because this whole episode, I think it's been very clear that you and I are on the side of like, yeah, don't be self-hateful and don't be a demonic piece of shit. And then without blinking an eye, I would just be like, it's a zero-sum world, which really is a justification. So if you're a psychopath, you don't really care. I'm just going to kill others. How would you get, I think, like myself, how would you get somebody who is a good person justify atrocity? Well, it's zero sum. So if I don't do it to their kids, they're going to do it to mine. So I'm actually a good dad. Man, that's a very clever way to make people do bad things who don't want to.
yeah, exactly. And most people live their lives,
No.
especially in the Christian world, knowing that love is something that's not just a subjective thing, like that higher agapic love of the First Corinthians is transformative. If you're dealing with somebody who's in a bad place, who doesn't love themselves, if they confront somebody who really cares about them, that will eventually transform the essence of who they are. If
Yeah.
but if you treat them, if they kind of want to be hurt, right? Like when they say when somebody in a really bad spiritual place, they'll say toxic shit because they want to be hurt. They want to have something bad said back to them or punch in the face or something to
Uh-huh.
just feel the pain to know they're alive. And or just to reconfirm their own bias that
That they're
they're
fine
not
and
they're hate worthy, right? Yeah, they're not love worthy, whatever. So they're but when they encounter and we've all experienced this from others, we've all at different times given this to others, and we've seen the effects individually that when you just give patience and love and you stay above the toxic words, you can pull out the best in somebody.
uh-huh.
Good teachers notice this all the time with students. But then we forget that that could also apply to whole societies and whole nations. You know, if you treat a nation like
Whoa.
shit and you're constantly threatening that nation or whatever, you're bringing out the worst in that people
They're probably going to
that,
get a bit defensive.
yeah, they're probably going to want to hurt you back as well because they've been hurt so many times because they've been under. So
Whoa.
then you just, it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy versus just showing some benevolence and some like grace and, you know, like trying to earn the trust of other people saying, okay, maybe we can actually believe in a world where we can both benefit by certain things and certain ways of being, even though we can respect each other's differences. We can create things that will benefit all of our kids in ways that are going to make their lives better than our lives. And that type of like creative, I think that there's more creative space to move into when we adopt that kind of non-zero sum like paradigm on a geopolitical level, and it works pretty well every time it's done, but it's usually sabotaged. So every time you got a
Mm.
JFK who's adopting that paradigm and using it practically to engage with other nations that are nominally our enemies, but he's like offering the Russians to like
Peace.
co-develop a space
Space
program
program
together.
with us. Yeah.
Yeah, like all of a sudden he's got to be eliminated because that's not the way of thinking permitted for the Manichaean zero sum architecture of the Cold War of, you know, the good capitalists versus
Uh,
the bad authoritarians. And so that it breaks the formula of control.
and that comes
Uh,
back to the intergenerational thing, which I've truly like harped on for I don't know 5 or 6 years. Is like because for me, I go, the entire thing about, let's just say getting to the Illuminati, for lack of a better phrase, the entire it is that you were just the most ruthless. You were the backstabber. You were the fucking you'll throw a baby in an alligator's mouth. Like that's how you rose to the top. Yet they have these plans that last centuries. So it's like you are the most ruthless psychopathic person, and then you all of a sudden flip and you go, and if I do this right, my grandkids are really going to enjoy this empire. It's like, no, you are by definition a ruthless person. So I've always wondered, where does the generational thing come from? How, you are antithetical to doing the right thing and teamwork and selflessness. Now all of a sudden you're going, I won't see the global dictatorship in my lifetime, but if I just work hard enough, maybe my kids will. It's like that's not part of it. So it would either come down to, I think you'd have to be true believer. And now I'm thinking like it might not even be true believer in like, yeah, that's a psychopath. It might be a true believer in like maybe one of the dudes involved with like shooting JFK or putting it together was some Tommy figure who's like, well, it's a zero-sum world, and if we don't do this, he's gonna let the Soviets win. So then you might even have people who are not necessarily fucking demons from hell. They might
mm,
actually think we just have to set up this global order. They might actually believe it's the right thing. The ones who are pulling the strings are probably ones that are just outright evil and they like it. But yeah, how would you get a transgenerational? Because it's antithetical to doing things. Society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they won't sit under. That's not what you do in the Illuminati when you're in a cloak cutting some baby's head off, right? You're not. Your whole thing is
mm.
not about like. You're about like I want to see it in my lifetime. You would never do something that's like, well, if we start this in 300 years, it'll work. It's not. That's not in the cards unless you truly believe you're you're doing it for the better.
Yeah, Plato is his dialogues are really good. They're really, really useful, I found in my studies. I've read all of his dialogues in many cases several times over, and he's very rigorous in the sense of like getting you to appreciate the lines of reasoning that will lead you astray and the lines of reasoning that will bear fruit. And the ones that bear fruit have attributes always, which is number one, the the self examination of our core axioms has to always be present. So beyond the words that people say, you're always looking for like what beyond the branches, the infinite branches of what somebody's opinions are. Go for the root, both of my own opinions and also the other person in general, right? So the core root is often the invisible but ever present core assumptions of human nature, the core like the big assumptions, right? Of like what is the nature of God? What is the nature of purposefulness? Like these big ideas that are embedded at the core that a lot of people haven't examined. They haven't thoroughly like tested out those axioms. They're just blindly sort of take them in, and they let that be the foundation upon which. possibly
Me,
faulty
me with
houses are
zero
built on.
sum. No, me with zero sum until like an hour ago.
It's cool that you just said that way. Um, So Plato's like looking at in what I think it's in his Gorgias dialogue. Yeah, Gorgias is the one how to live a good life. What is a good life? And he's dealing with actual sophists who are real people managing to make the world worse in his day in Athens as it was collapsing. Gorgias being like one of the top sophist teachers, and two of his students, Polus and Callicles, are the other antagonists against Socrates, the teacher of Plato. And Plato's trying to get across like, well, what is the good? Like, how do you even define what that is? And does anybody think that they're doing evil? Like when they wake up, even people who are in a destructive modality, who are doing the very opposite of everything that natural law prescribes, do they wake up and think that they're doing evil, or do they have a perverse idea of the good that causes them to justify and do the thing that they do? And it's just wonderful how he's able to, in various dialogues, but especially in that one, demonstrate that the oligarch who has the greatest power to do evil or to satisfy their lust, the greatest power to satisfy their pleasures, to create even more lustful pleasures that they thus have the power also to satisfy while punishing their enemies, which is defined as the greatest justice, the greatest good, is actually the greatest slave. The person who does that and can't think of a higher good beyond that, that touches on like agape and self-dignity, and especially the health of the soul, because most of them they haven't defined what the soul is for them. They just have a very abstract idea. They don't really think about it too deeply. But for them, like the pleasures of the flesh is the maximum pleasure that we could achieve, and that which gives you greatest physical pleasure is the standard we use to judge what is morally the best thing to do in any given situation, and that which gives you the greatest pain physically is the standard we can judge what not to do, what's morally the wrong thing to do. And that's like incompetent. Like that's not the that's that he proves why that's flawed and self-contradictory, but that the person who actually abides by that is the greatest slave, even though they might appear on the surface to be the happiest, most powerful tyrant, right? Above as an alpha, above everybody. They're actually the greatest slave because the worst part of themselves is the master, and the better part of themselves is subdued by the like this idea that every man has a bit of uh, a beast and an angel duking it
Hmm.
out, like so the part that should be domesticated is actually the thing running the show. So then at that point, all of the mature, if you're at that in like spiritual state, all of the intellectual mature constructs that you create, the use of the imagination that you apply to manifest your desires in reality, which won't happen by yourself because you're probably born into a family. There's a network. There's a process that we're born into. That which we will individually resonate with and be disgusted by uh, dissonant. Will find opposed to what we see as our identity. Will be faked by that ignorance of our true self, and that effectively the imagination, the intellect become perverted to create stories, to create constructs like Francis Bacon does when he lays out his New Atlantis, and how science should serve the elites by creating a system of basically secular priests that manage the constructs of what is permitted as permissible thoughts in society in this utopian new age that he wishes to bring in at some point in the future, long after he's dead. So they have this transgenerational idea of a new age at some point that they're all kind of helping to nudge the world towards. And it can't, like Mustafa Moon says, we can't permit certain sets of ideas that deal with purposefulness. We have to allow people only to deal with ideas that explain or describe, but nothing that touches in the realm of purposefulness. Because that's where discoveries happen, and that's where disequilibrium will happen. Because we we we're worshiping a religion of control and laziness. Effectively, I think it's ultimately one of the core mechanisms is probably a fear of death. But if you believe that, if you don't understand what your soul is, you haven't taken the time to deeply philosophize about the nature of like this immortal divine quality that transcends the physical part of our bodies, and you identify too much with aspects of ourselves that are ephemeral, then you're kind of always going to be afraid of death. You're going to be obsessed with an unhealthy idea of immortality, like a transhumanist idea of immortality, of uploading your so-called whatever
Yeah.
neural mapping into a fucking cloud or a cyborg or some shit to have more hedonism in an alternative multiverse that's created as a video game construct that you can live into or something, whatever. And also like, you work laziness. You don't like doing hard, like useful work. All of the work that they do, they're very rigorous. It's impressive, as you were saying before, right? It's kind of like almost awe-inspiring to see the level of sophistication that the oligarchy is into creating sacred myths, mechanisms of multi-generational fuckery. It's impressive, but it's such a misuse of that rigor. They're offended by the idea that they should get their hands dirty or learn like a useful skill that would otherwise give them a bit of humility that they're not God, like that they could participate in something useful that's beyond them in an objectively good way for everybody. They're offended by that idea. It's weird.
No, it's. I was gonna say, did anybody wake up thinking they'd do evil? I think about Curtis LeMay, who Dr. Strangelove was mocking, but Curtis LeMay, who's the
Mm,
Secretary of the Air Force under Kennedy, probably had him killed, but was an honorable fighter in World War II. He would lead his bombing formations. He was at the front. He was like, if I get shot down, or if any of us get shot down, it's me. And he fucking, loved the country and set up Strategic Air Command. But his whole thing was, if you're going to use violence in war, use excessive violence, kill civilians, kill far more than you need to, because ultimately you'll save more lives. And from a guy that, fought in World War II, he probably wasn't even entirely wrong in that assumption. But did he wake up thinking he was doing evil? No, I think he woke up thinking he was going to protect the country where his wife and kids lived. And it's like very few, I think, actually think they're doing evil.
mm,
Um, Now I was gonna say what you said about beyond these like systems of want and imagination and bring things into reality. Like I'm huge on meditation. I meditate every single day and have for almost 20 years. In 2008, I think I started, maybe
mm.
2007. And yeah, it's always kind of funny how like I'll always be meditating and I'll be thinking about like how I want to grow the podcast and blah blah blah. And it's always have these like different thoughts of how it's going to grow, and then I'll like imagine it and what it would be like to have more subscribers and what it'd be like to make more money and blah blah blah. And they're at the forefront if you get into meditation. At first glance, you feel like you're going deeper because it's deeper than your everyday waking consciousness. But I find it's very much rooted in like the animal. It's like I'm gonna fucking beat every other person that has a podcast. I'm gonna win. I'm gonna be the champion. And not
Mm.
like I'm gonna go fuck them over and steal from them, but just like I'm gonna be number one. Which I don't even think is a necessarily like bad way to go about it. If it's healthy, you don't hurt anyone, you go for
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah. No,
So
that's
I,
that's
I
not a
don't play
bad
sports. I,
composition.
I work out, but I
Yeah,
still like in my
yeah,
mind I'm
yeah,
competing. Like, all right.
yeah.
But then if I go deeper and I start to like less of the ego, less of like what is Tommy, what is less of like that up on an altar. And I just think I'm like, well, one of the things I do is like I've put together like special forces guys with doctors who use like psychedelics as treatment, and like they actually put things together and they have these like unofficial programs because technically you can't call it medicine because then it'd be a medical. How they use because like right, 22 veterans a day commit suicide, and how they can prevent suicide through the use of psychedelics. So you have the medical side, and then you have the special forces guys because I can't go talk to a special forces guys. Really, they only see other special forces guys as peers, and then the doctor obviously for the medical side of it, or like other things like ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. It's these special forces guys that go and legitimately physically kick down fucking doors and liberate trafficked children. They are like real life guardian angels. And I've been able to put like fundraisers together for people with that. And I look at stuff like that, and none of that has my name on it, and I don't want my name on it. It never even pops into my mind of like that's the right thing to do, but I should do it or not. It's just this thing I think about, and when I'm deep in meditation, I'll be like, what other good can I do? And no part of it's ever like, and where do I want my name on it? It's just like, what good? And it's love, not for like family members or friends, for people
Yeah.
I'll never meet. But that is
Yo,
so
dude.
much more powerful than
Absolutely.
like the
Absolutely.
competitive beast that's like I want to win. That's like a firecracker. When I start thinking about like the good I can just help facilitate, it's like the furnace of the sun. Like you feel the love in every part of your body. You're like, dude, more than my name being like the biggest podcaster. What if I could, you're just like, dude, what if I could help? And you just like, that's what I want. And it's like, you feel that out to your fingertips. And it's like, that's the deeper thing. The imagination's
Yeah, yeah,
fun and scheming and I get it. Competition's fun.
yeah.
But there's like a deeper level where it's like, it's a fusion bomb of just like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to help. And that's available like within all of us. And if I was a bad person, I would imagine I wouldn't want people exploring that realm of love and gratitude. I'd want them to stay on the surface and be like, it's a zero-sum game, fucker. You better bomb Vietnam or they're gonna bomb New York, which is completely dog shit. But like, yeah,
Right. Absolutely, man. I couldn't is well, and that is always when you like when you look at Ben Franklin, what allowed this guy to be such success in like a deal with the forces of evil, the way he was able to deal with them multi-generate, like he dealt with it over decades and decades. His life early on, he was recruited by Cotton Mather to be a part of a movement that was destined to bring about I think the healthy idea of a new age, like the idea of an Augustinian city of God concept that human beings are destined for more and better than what empires have demanded we adapt to, which in St. Augustine's city of God, he's like, well, what defines a just law that should be abided by and followed versus an unjust law? And to do that requires a recognition that the laws of God Holy God is not something separate from his creation, that he's constantly present and manifest in all creation at all time, always. That there's no like whereas in the in the Gnostic world or the Manichaean world that Augustine broke out of, because originally he was a Manichaean initiate, right? From the followers of Mani and the Gnostic school. In their universe, God created the universe, but has no role to play, is impotent to influence anything within the created universe, the material world. So, like the Gnostics believe that, you had you had somehow you ever looked into Gnosticism?
no, I feel like I should.
It's crazy because it ties into what Ben Franklin was battling and how he did it well. Because he studied the Augustinian thinker Cotton Mather, who wrote a book called Essays to Do Good. And the whole point when you read the Essays to Do Good, as Ben Franklin talked about in his autobiography, he said this is like the guidebook for my entire life. Is you do acts of indiscriminate goodness whenever possible. So he's creating institutions, the first libraries, fire departments. He's organizing things, and he's not taking credit for it. He's just trying to edify people to bring out the better part of themselves in any way possible. And in the course of doing that, he's becoming really successful and really like people recognize that he doesn't fit their assumptions of what a selfish human being is, but he's so much because of that effectiveness, he's competent, he's rigorous, he understands evil, he's not a utopian idiot.
Yeah.
He understands evil really good. He fucking infiltrated the Hellfire Club and got intel back to the Patriots in America. Like he knows how to navigate evil. He knows its psyche, its essence. So he's not naive. But he's able to like create the conditions out of which the American Revolution were able to emerge as a new type of society that would more perfectly, but not perfectly, but more perfectly manifest the ideals outlined by Saint Augustine in the City of God, would call for this idea that human law will is just when it meshes or it's in conformity with God's law. And if it causes violence or enslavement or the destruction of freedom of other humans, and it's a law, then it should not be abided by if that's the effect and the intention of said kinds of laws. So it gave people an ability to discern what are rules that are arbitrary and maybe even a form of violence that should be overthrown versus legit laws that may not even exist that I could go to jail for, like Martin Luther King went to jail in Birmingham, but he made the point that this is actually I'm in jail because I believe in God's law, not arbitrary KKK John Crow laws. Um, and it was very like simple but still very profound. And the Gnostic thing is important because in the Gnostic cosmology, there's this idea that this weird myth, like everybody has a creation myth. So the Gnostic creation myth, though there's different flavors of it, the core feature that's the same no matter what Gnostic sect you're looking at. This is like the competition to early Christianity. Um, some of them were acting like they were Christians, but they were just like ISIS worshippers in disguise and, Mithraic. Mithric worshippers in disguise, um, is that you have like usually an entity called like in some cases it's Yaldabaoth, some arbitrary like name. Yaldabaoth is like this god that is the demiurge. So God created the universe, but he didn't create the universe. He created sexualized um elementals that start fucking each other. And each of these elementals generates sort of, they're kind of like super angelic beings, whatever, but they start fucking. Their primary motive is to fuck and to procreate in that sense. But one of them along the way, maybe like 7 generations in of elemental spreading, uh, is a being called the Sophia. And Sophia is like is a feminized elemental who despises men, hates men, and she hates them so much that she fucks herself and she procreates with herself to generate some mutant child called Yaldabaoth. This is in the Nag Hammadi scriptures and shit. Yaldabaoth believes that he is the sole god of the universe, but he is animated purely by evil, hate, and ignorance. He's the god of the Old Testament. He creates the world in 7 days, and all of the material creation, the heavens, the birds, the bees, the humans, the thoughts humans have, the feelings we have, are all the creation of Yaldabaoth. That the material world is thus evil, made in the image of an evil creator, and thus to return back to the source, we have to shed all of the artifacts of the material world. If we want to like tap back into goodness, so called, we have to break things like conscience, which is the artifact of Yaldabaoth, belief in conscience, justice. These are all artifacts that are evil, that hold us back from our true actualizing potential in some weird, you know, superhuman destiny we're meant to like live into. So we have to do that. But to do that requires that we merge opposites. That we create acts, ritualistic acts of initiation that are like sacred sinning. We take the sacred, we take the profane, and we merge them together. We take murder, we take sex, we merge it together. We take opposites, we merge them together. And the more you do that with the help of some drugs always help, opium, whatever, ergot, you name it, will help get to an altered state along the way, overseen by, a certain priest class. You will eventually deconstruct. You will so-called break free and become convinced that you maybe are actually God. The creation that you're living in is caused entirely by your desires. That there's no objective reality except the reality that you manifest. And in that sense, the so-called good God that transcends the evil creation, the evil creator God that is the so-called God of the Bible, um, has no role, is like not good, not evil. It's just light. It's just it is, but is impotent, is incapable of improving or influencing creation. So acts of goodness are meaningless. Sorry, I see you want to
I was gonna say,
chime in.
and we have to put a pin in it there. I'm fucking
Yeah,
retarded. I have another show in like 30 seconds. I
yeah.
completely let this get away from me. I thought we were gonna do an hour. I did not realize we were cruising on 2 hours. I
Oh shit.
apologize. I
Okay,
ended
yeah.
abruptly. I have to do the next one.
All good. Yeah. All right.
I'll send this to you, and we will pick up from there. Again, I don't mean to fucking abruptly stop it, but that's I get the sign of a good show. Is I legitimately thought we were at like an hour. I just looked at the clock and I was like, motherfucker, I gotta run.
All right. Cool. All
Dude,
right.
I will send this to you. I appreciate it. The links to all your stuff will be in the description, and we will plan another one sooner than later.
All right.
All
Sounds
right,
good.
man. You're the
Bye.
man, dude. Thank you so much.